So if you could, help me welcome Andy Jackson.
All right, well, I don't need to introduce myself. I have to say that is not a quotation. That is the name of the presentation. I'm not important enough to put my name on the bottom of anything that I quote. But as he talked about, I am going to be kind of looking at some of what I've noticed the perspectives to be when I'm a general ed teacher versus a special ed teacher versus a parent versus a foster parent. Both of my kids were adopted through foster care, and the third child, who's mine, is not officially legally mine, but I share with his grandmother, sort of. But I wanted to start, and some of you have heard this before, but it's the parable of the blind man and the elephant. And these blind people are sitting around, they know there's something in the room, and they want to go and figure out what it is. So one person walks over, feels a leg, and says, I know what this is, it's a wall. And the guy says, okay. Well, he goes over, he feels the tusk, and he says, no, you're wrong. It's not a wall, it's a spear, it's a sword. Okay, and so continues the third, the fourth, the fifth. One person feels the tail and says it's a rope. One person feels the ear and says it's a fan. And so you've got all these people who think they understand the entire picture because they've seen a small glimpse into a part of this elephant. And I guess that's what I've found, not that I'm necessarily calling students elephants, but they've got a lot of parts to them. And as a teacher, as a parent, as a foster parent, I found that I only see a small part. And one of the interesting things is that, the reason I like this is because it's still the same elephant. It's still the same characteristics. All those things are true. It does have a tusk that looks like, a sword or a spear. It does have a tail that looks like a fan. All those things are true. Okay, they're all important. When you want to describe to somebody what an elephant is, you have to know that they have massive legs. You have to know that they have very sharp tusks. You have to know that they have a tail. You have to know they have big floppy ears. All of those descriptions, while one of them by themselves isn't accurate, all of them together can allow you to begin to piece together what the big picture is. And the other thing that I think is important, I've sat in many meetings, myself included, where, it's easy to get into the right versus wrong. I see a wall because I felt a leg, and I see a fan because I felt an ear, and we argue about, well, you must be wrong, I must be right, and usually it's not quite that simple. It's that there's many things involved, and each of us can understand a small piece of that. And here's the other thing. None of the people in this story, in that parable, ever walked around the entire elephant and felt everything. But they didn't have to. The children that we serve are so multifaceted and so special in so many different ways. There's no possible way for one person to fully grasp everything there is to know. And so what we are challenged with is taking those little glimpses and those little pictures that we get from professionals, from parents, from, all those individuals coming together to help us get a picture. And so the goal today is to, like I said, maybe help you see a different part of the child or a different perspective of somebody on the IEP team than you may have seen before. I've got to preface it by saying all of my slides typically have "my" in quotation marks. I have to give that disclaimer. That's my perspective. You could talk to a special education teacher who may have a very different one. But from being one and from talking to some, I find that when I come to an IEP meeting and I look at the skill sets of my role and my job as a special ed teacher, this is typically what I find. The focus for a special education teacher is on individual student needs. It's their job to meet with parents and general ed teachers and therapists and doctors and try to put together or help facilitate the putting together of this plan. Legal requirements for the education program. Unfortunately, as the special ed teacher, you are often the knowledgeable one when it comes to what you legally can and can't do. And I, as a special ed teacher, find that a lot of times the general ed teachers weren't taught that. And that's, neither here nor there, but oftentimes the special ed teacher in that IEP team is the one who makes sure that they're doing things the right way and that the laws are being followed and those sorts of things. I've also found at times that one of the weaknesses of being a special education teacher is that because you work with so many different individuals at a time, it's hard to get a big picture of the class dynamic or of the school-wide dynamic. They have various goals to address throughout the day. They go from working, or at least I found, I go from working with a kindergarten student one day, 1 hour, to working with a 4th grade student for 30 minutes, to working with another kindergartner learn their numbers, to teaching a 4th grade student multiplication and long division strategies. So, it's important to communicate with the parent and the general ed teacher in that role. You're kind of the liaison between what happens at school and what happens at home a lot of the time. And that their background is in some academic, behavioral, and cognitive strategies. I've learned that unfortunately people have said, oh, that's the special ed teacher, let's ask him. When oftentimes I don't know the answer. I may know where to find it. I may know somebody else who does. But we have training in some academic, behavioral, and cognitive strategies. That does not make us experts. So that's kind of the, coming to an IEP team with a special ed perspective or coming to approaching an education program with that kind of special ed teacher hat. That's kind of what I found to be true. Here's what I found to be true when approaching the IEP team as a general ed teacher, which I am now. I teach 4th grade. My job, I sit in meetings all day and I hear people say, this is what 4th grade students have to be able to do. They have to be able to do it. And so they're being beaten with understanding what skills they have to know. And sometimes they know a few accommodations that can help, but they know, they're the experts, I guess, on what is the 4th grade or what is the grade level specific curriculum for that child. More so than the special ed teacher who has 6 different grades and 6 different individual IEP goals that she's watching, or he's watching. Often, the general ed teacher sees how the single student fits into the class and into the grade. Not that there can't be outside observation, but typically for 7.5 hours a day, it's that general education teacher that watches the interaction between that child, between other students, between that child and other adults in the building, between that child and kind of their own cognitive processes and the way they perceive things. Often, counter to the special ed, they do have a better understanding of their class as a whole. I understand how all 27 or 28 of my 4th grade students function together. I don't know as much, although I make it my point to know as much about each individual child as I can, but nobody knows more about the dynamic of my classroom than me. I'm there 7.5 hours a day, mostly 5 days a week. Every once in a while on a Friday, they'll let me out for things like this. Stresses the importance of data sheets and methods. I cannot tell you how many times data-driven decisions are brought to a general education teacher's mind, and they are important. But often, it's got to be efficient. If I've got 28 kids and 5 or 6 of them with IEPs and we swap classes, so I teach about 63 kids a day with varying needs, the way that I'm collecting data for it to be important has to be simple. And it has to be something that I can do in the moment to give you the most data. Asking me to write up something 45 minutes to an hour after it happened, you're not going to get that accurate data. And the last one, often I see the role of a general ed teacher downplayed on the IEP team. Oh, that person can sign as a general ed teacher. Oh, that person's a signature. When really, that's the person who spends a good chunk of the school day with that child and sees them interact with the class and with each other. And so, general ed teachers, much like the special ed teacher, has the role to facilitate that interaction. It's often the general ed teacher who has the input in, here's what's working, here's what's not working. When we look to amend, here's what I've seen that has been helpful, rather than just, oh, I'm here to sign my name on the dotted line and hear people talk about things that I have no interest in. So those are my 2 education perspectives. Here's my parent perspective. When I show up to an IEP as a parent, my child is important. The standards are important, but my child is more important. Okay, I don't want to do anything that's going to be the detriment of my child in the sake of, well, that's the Alabama state standard. Okay, as an educator, I understand it. As a parent, I'm not interested in understanding that. My child is the priority, period. Involve me in the IEP and learning process. Okay, I want to know as a parent, what is it that the IEP team feels my child needs? You know, I may know my child best, but I don't know how my child learns best. I don't follow my child around school 7.5 hours a day. I don't know what they do and what he does in situations when I'm not there. Quality family time comes first, even before homework. And it's odd that I'm a teacher and, my perspective has changed a lot since being a parent. And that is, you know what, there are some nights where getting everybody to sleep and having a good evening or trying to diffuse that meltdown is a little bit more important than going over those 10 multiplication facts or reading those 10 sight words. And, again, by parent perspective, it just is. Every day of the week, my family time is more important. I see my child in many scenarios. I see my child in school. I see my child at church. I see my child out in the community when we're shopping. I see my child at home. I see my child in informal. So while the school people can maybe speak to school settings, as a parent, I can speak to various settings across the board. And this is very true for me, if you care about my child, I'm willing to try almost anything. If you show up to an IEP meeting with the attitude that you are going to fix my child and that I am just a neglectful little parent that is so lucky that you are here to help me, we probably won't get along very well. But if somebody comes and conveys sincere compassion for my kid, and we're going to make mistakes, we all do it. But I'm more willing to try that give and take if I feel that at the end of the day, their priority is my child. And lastly, and this is my feeling as a general ed teacher too. If you're not going to send me a note every time my child does something good, please don't send me a note every time my child does something bad. If they do something big that's bad, sure, I want to know about it. But if they do something big that's good, send me a note about that too. And just to say, I have some people who, I didn't get a note from the teacher today, I assume everything went well. That's even a simple smiley face. Put something down. And then lastly, as a foster parent, I don't want to say inherited because it was by choice, but inherited the role of being a foster parent to some students with different needs. One had cerebral palsy. He's back with his grandmother. One has intellectual disabilities. He's my kid that, like I said, is mine and lives with his grandma, but is a former foster kid, and I see him more than I don't. And here's my role as when I show up to an IEP meeting for a child who I advocate for, who I'm a foster parent for. Most of the time, I'm there on behalf of the child and their family. Not that I'm not interested in the education side, not that I'm not interested in the school's perspective, but more often than not, as a foster parent, when I show up, as a surrogate parent, more often than not, my role is to play that advocate for the child and the family. Typically, if there's an advocate involved or if there's foster care involved, there are a lot of needs to consider, not just educational ones. And that's true for kids who even don't have an advocate, but typically that advocate is going to be more aware of those outside needs, what services they're receiving maybe from child services or counseling, or if parents are undergoing parenting classes, things that can help paint that large picture. Often, as an advocate or as a foster parent or, as a volunteer, it's your job, kind of similar to a special ed teacher in some ways, to take in information from everybody. From a child services caseworker, from a principal, from a teacher, from a biological parent, and try to kind of piece all these things together and kind of make everybody's views represented and try and find something that works for everybody. Helps the family effectively express needs and goals. And that is to say that actually one of the ways that I met him over there, there was something going on in one of the school systems that my son attends, and I didn't think it was right. And I didn't know that it wasn't right. I had a feeling. I had done some research, and I'd felt like, okay, I think this is wrong. And, so I went to his grandmother, and I said, what are your thoughts on this? And she said, I agree with you. I think it's wrong. I don't know what to do about it. And so at that point, I was able to effectively help her express her needs. We took advantage of the Ask an Attorney on their website, which is excellent. Quick question, quick answer that kind of helped me know, yes, I was on the right track. And those are things that often, in fact, I know that child's grandmother would not have been able to do it. And often as an advocate, whether you were a foster parent or even a teacher advocating for one of your students, often you'll need to step in and make sure that your parent understands what their rights are and that their needs need to be considered as well. And last, they can be a great liaison between the family and the school. Typically, if there's foster care or something involved, there may be a disconnect between a parental bond and that child. And often I find that if you're an effective advocate, you can kind of be a liaison between helping the school understand what the parent's needs are and helping the parent understand what the school is asking for. All that to say, why is it important to consider all perspectives? Why is it important that when I show up as a parent, I'm still mindful of what the special ed teacher's role is and what, the parent's role is? And I haven't even gotten into, because I have very little experience with it, the professionals who show up, whether it be a behavior analyst, whether it be a speech therapist, whether it be, in some cases, legal representation. What do all of those people play? Why is it all important? And again, it allows for the collaboration of many of us. And we all have different roles. All those people that I've talked about and that I've been have all seen different parts of the child, but it's still the same kid. It's just that different part that I'm allowed to see. Using a team mentality, this is Alabama where football is incredible. You guys understand the way teams work. The linebackers are built much differently than the offensive linemen. They have very different jobs. Both are very important. And understanding kind of where everybody's roles begin and end is key to helping the child. And at the end, it helps us get a sense of the whole picture. As we talked about at the beginning, nobody can walk around the entire elephant by themselves. So by piecing together bits and pieces from what we know, we can try to figure out something that will help us guide our plans in the future. And the bottom, children have unique needs, so it makes sense that a team of different people with different skills, with different resources and different perspectives have to work together. If one person had all the answers, that person would be a millionaire making tons of money, and they would absolutely make everything better for everybody. As it stands, that's why we're all here. We all recognize that there are other things we can do. And like I said, the first step is knowing, what your role is and what your strengths are, and knowing that your perspectives are valid and being able to consider everybody else's. And last are three things that as a teacher I found work. Alabama Learning Exchange. It's free, alex.al.us. That is the course of study for every grade, K through 12, every subject. So if you're a parent or you're an advocate or you're wanting to know, okay, what is my child expected to be able to do, that's free. They offer sample lesson plans. You can search by subject. You can search by grade if you want to see kind of how the math skills progress over a series of years. Mastering the Maze is, I guess, a special ed resource book created for special ed teachers. They're correct. It is a maze. It is several pages. And it is very confusing. But what I like about it is it does have a table of contents. And so when I had a question about what they were doing to my other son, I went to that page, and I had to read about 4 or 5 pages to get what should have taken me about a paragraph to understand. But nonetheless, knowing to go there, if you have a question about special education, that's a great place to go. And last, Class Dojo. I was talking about ways to effectively collect data that can be shared in real time. And that's a web-based program. It's free. I input my classes. There are sample positive and negative behaviors that I can give to parents in real time that they can see. It allows parents to send me messages. They don't have my email address or my phone number, so it's not like they're going to stalk me outside of the app. And it allows for detailed reports. I can print off reports based on the week, based on the month, based on the year, based on specific behaviors, based on positive versus negative, all those sorts of things. So being from North Dakota, I talk very, very, very fast. But hopefully that made some semblance of sense and you picked up on something possibly that you had not learned before. So thank you.